My son's wife told him, she doesn't fit the family image. Patricia Gray, widow and mother for 35 years, didn't flinch. Daniel, the boy I once taught to tie his shoes, nodded along like the decision had already been made. By morning, the contractor's deposit for their condo renovation would be reversed, and the trust agreement shredded in my attorney's office. I'd been both mother and benefactor. Now I was the guardian of my own legacy. And when the workmen packed up their tools, they finally learned whose image really paid the bills. I'm curious, where in the world are you joining us from? Drop your city or country in the comments and make sure you're subscribed for all the latest updates. She didn't shout. She smiled and said, I just don't fit. The elevator hummed its way to the 12th floor, and Gloria smoothed the front of her sweater. She had a small tin of cinnamon cookies in her bag, and a head full of ideas for garlands, table runners, and candle arrangements. The holidays were her season, and Michael's new condo was begging for a touch of warmth. When the doors opened, she was met with her son's quick, familiar grin. Mom, you made it, Michael said, reaching to take her coat. His voice still held that boyish lilt that always softened her. Vanessa appeared behind him, balancing a phone and a mug, her gaze flicking up for barely a second. Hi, she said, not slowing as she crossed to the kitchen. Gloria followed the smell of coffee and the sound of her own footsteps echoing on the polished floor. She placed the tin on the counter. Brought a little something, she offered. Vanessa set her mug down, eyes scanning the space like a critic inspecting a painting. Mom's style isn't really our aesthetic, she said lightly, almost as if she were commenting on the weather. Her smile was precise, symmetrical, practiced. Michael shifted uncomfortably, tugging at the edge of his sleeve. We've been keeping things minimal, he added quickly. Gloria felt the muscles in her back tighten, but her mouth found a pleasant curve. Of course, she said, not minimal can be lovely. Upstairs, the light poured in from tall windows onto bare walls and furniture that looked like it had been ordered straight from a catalog. She made the usual polite noises. Oh, the view, the natural light, the clean lines, but something in the air had cooled. In the kitchen, her eyes drifted to the fridge. A row of clear plastic sleeves held renovation blueprints, color swatches, and receipts, neatly pinned like part of an exhibit. She leaned closer, seeing dates that went back months. She hadn't heard a word about it. Not a single. What do you think, Mom? She stepped back, smoothing her expression as Michael returned from taking a call. Want to see the balcony? He asked, his voice bright. Another time, she said gently. By the time she reached the street, the December wind had sharpened. She walked the 2 blocks to her car without rushing, the cold slicing through her coat in thin, deliberate lines. That evening, in her quiet kitchen, she placed her bag on the table and opened the drawer where her will documents lived. The folder was still the heavy navy one her attorney had given her years ago. Inside, tucked between insurance summaries and old bank statements, was the codicil she'd half forgotten, a neat little amendment written after her husband passed, when she'd been sure she knew exactly where her money would go. She ran her fingers over her own signature, remembering how certain she'd felt at the time. The house was still. Only the hum of the refrigerator filled the space. She thought of Vanessa's smile, thin as fishing line, and the way the renovation plans had been displayed like a private language she wasn't meant to read. The phone lay on the table beside her. She stared at it for a long moment before picking it up. Her thumbs moved slowly over the keys, each word measured, deliberate. To Carla, I might just need to cancel everything. She hit send. She didn't want my help, so I hired the inspector myself. The next morning, Gloria sat at her kitchen table with a mug of black coffee and her phone angled against a ceramic sugar bowl. On the screen, a familiar square jaw and crow's feet smiled back. Morning, Gloria, said Tom Laird, a contractor she'd known since he was fresh out of trade school. Haven't heard from you in a while. I need a set of eyes on a condo project, she said, her voice level. Quietly, discretion matters. No, she replied, stirring her coffee though she hadn't added sugar. My sons. I want to know what they're really spending. 2 days later, she met him in the lobby of Michael and Vanessa's building. Tom wore a battered leather jacket and carried a clipboard tucked under one arm. The concierge barely looked up when Gloria signed them in. They rode the elevator in silence, and when they reached the door, she tapped the spare key Michael had given her for emergencies. Inside, the rooms were bright but impersonal, half-finished trim work, a scent of fresh paint lingering in the air. Tom paced slowly through each space, occasionally crouching to peer at baseboards, or running a hand along the edges of cabinetry. His pencil scratched against the clipboard. "Whoever's managing this," he murmured, "has a taste for top-shelf everything." When they were back in the hallway, he handed her a folded page. "They're already 28% over what this place should cost. And they're heavy on one supplier, Vanessa's boutique, I'd bet. Custom fixtures, imported tile." Gloria slipped the paper into her bag without looking. "Thank you." The following afternoon, Michael called. His voice was easy, unaware. "Hey Mom, could you stop by the bank and co-sign the next renovation installment? Just a formality, since you helped set up the account." She was in her study, surrounded by the faint scent of paper and cedar from the filing cabinet. "Send it over," she said. When the envelope arrived, she studied the documents under the desk lamp. Her name was there, neatly typed beside Michael's, as if permanence could be conjured by font choice alone. The pen in her hand hovered for a moment, then she drew a clean line through her name. She signed the amendment that removed her from any financial responsibility, her handwriting deliberate, almost beautiful in its firmness. That evening, she called Carla. "It's done," she said simply. "Good," Carla replied. "If they don't want you in their space, let them manage their own chaos." After the call, Gloria opened the Navy Trust binder again. The tabs were still crisp. She turned to the section on disbursements, tracing the legal phrasing with her fingertips. She'd forgotten how much control the language gave her, full authority to suspend or revoke funding at will. She leaned back in her chair. The idea settled over her like a quilt in winter. If she wasn't welcome in their image, she wasn't obligated to finance it. The decision wasn't hot with anger. It was cool, almost serene. The same kind of calm she felt when deadheading roses, necessary removal for something better to grow. Outside, the December night deepened. A thin sheet of frost was already forming on the lawn. She closed the binder, the weight of it satisfying in her hands. In the quiet, she could hear the hum of the refrigerator again, the same sound that had filled the air when she'd touched the codicil. But this time her mind wasn't wandering. It was clear. On her desk, a legal pad waited. She wrote a single line: "Withdraw renovation fund. Notify bank. File dissolution papers." The pen didn't shake. The next morning, she would walk into her attorney's office with that pad, hand it across the desk, and file the papers that would drain every cent from the renovation account. The account emptied before they even saw the memo. The attorney's office was still waking when Gloria arrived. The front desk smelled faintly of brewed coffee and paper fresh from the copier. She placed the legal pad on the receptionist's counter and waited while a clerk disappeared with it. By the time she left, the sky was pale with the kind of winter light that flattens everything into shades of gray. In her tote was a slim manila folder, confirmation that the renovation account would be dissolved and funds returned to her personal account within 24 hours. Back home, she logged into her bank portal. The numbers shifted as the transfer processed, the account swelling in neat black digits. For a long moment, she just stared. It wasn't joy she felt, or even triumph, just a cool, steadying weight. Next came the trustee access form. She sat at her desk, removed Michael's name from the signature line, and initialed each change with deliberate care. The pen's point caught slightly on the thick paper, leaving tiny ridges under her fingertips. By the time she sealed the envelope, the decision felt as final as the wax her grandmother used to press on letters. Late in the afternoon, her phone buzzed. Michael's name glowed across the screen. "Mom, why did the renovation stop?" Her thumbs hovered. She typed, erased, then wrote it as plainly as she could, "Because I don't fit the image." She set the phone face down on the desk. Minutes later, it rang again. Vanessa's number. Gloria let it roll to voicemail. The playback was crisp. Vanessa's tone clipped but edged with urgency. "We need that money. I don't know what you're trying to prove, but you're making this harder than it has to be." Gloria deleted it without saving. That night, she poured herself a small glass of wine and pulled the Navy Trust binder toward her. The lamplight warmed the gold lettering on the cover. She opened to the section she'd read before, the legal phrasing almost lyrical in its coldness. The power to revoke, suspend, or redirect funds was hers alone. She ran her finger under the sentence, feeling its quiet finality. She thought of the years that document had sat in her cabinet, inert, while she assumed goodwill was a permanent fixture in family life. The knowledge that it wasn't, that it could be altered by one woman's smile and a handful of words settled over her like dust she'd never noticed before. She closed the binder slowly, set her empty glass in the sink, and moved to the back porch. The night air bit at her cheeks. From here she could see the outline of her winter garden, bare stems, frozen soil, the kind of stillness that hides the work happening underneath. The phone buzzed again inside, but she didn't move. Relief pressed against her ribs, not light and fluttering, but dense, grounded. There was sorrow in it too, the kind that made her shoulders ache, but it felt cleaner than the resentment she'd been carrying. When she finally went back in, the house was warm with the smell of rosemary from a pot she'd left simmering on the stove. She placed the binder back in its drawer and slid the manila folder in beside it. The drawer shut with a soft click, as if tucking something in for the night. Morning came cold and bright. The mail slot clattered just after 9. Gloria padded down the hall in slippers, scooping up a stack of envelopes, junk flyers, a utilities bill, and one thick white envelope with her attorney's letterhead, the flap sealed tight. Across the front in precise type were 2 words that made her pause in the hallway. Formal termination. She stood there with it in her hand, the heat from the radiator against her back, knowing that whatever was inside would mark the end of something she could never quietly put back. She thought it was about money. It was about being erased. The envelope was heavier than it looked. Gloria slid it open with the edge of a butter knife, the paper giving way with a dry sigh. Inside was the attorney's letter on crisp bond, formal language, declaring the renovation fund dissolved and the trust primary disbursement privileges revoked. A second sheet confirmed updated account titles. Her signature stared back at her, black and sharp. She set the papers neatly on the counter. The house was silent, except for the clock ticking in the hall. It was barely an hour later when she heard the low growl of Michael's car pulling into her drive. The slam of the door carried through the frosted glass, followed by the brisk click of Vanessa's heels on the front walk. Gloria opened the door before they could knock. Michael's face was red, eyes lit with the kind of heat that used to flash when he was a boy, denied a treat. "What the hell is this?" He thrust a folded notice toward her. Vanessa was a step behind, her voice a hiss meant to wound. "You've humiliated us. Do you understand?" Gloria stepped back into the foyer, letting the cold air follow them in. "If I don't fit your world," she said evenly, "I won't finance it." Michael's mouth tightened. "You're overreacting. This is emotional blackmail." The words landed like stones, but she kept her gaze steady. "You've built something without me. Now you can pay for it without me." Vanessa's laugh was small and sharp. "Selfish," she murmured, as if the word were an observation rather than an insult. She turned toward the door, already dismissing the moment. Michael lingered, his eyes scanning hers for something remorse. Maybe, but she gave him nothing. Eventually he followed Vanessa out, the front door closing with a hollow thud. For a long time Gloria stood in the same spot, listening to the echo of their departure. That afternoon, Carla came by with a bag of clementines, and a look that didn't need explanation. They sat at the kitchen table, the letter between them. "You've got the right," Carla said, peeling a fruit in one long spiral. "Legal and moral. They don't get to decide your worth and still spend your money." Gloria nodded, though her throat felt tight. "It's not about the money," she said softly. "It's about being erased." They were quiet for a moment, the only sound the faint pop of citrus skin tearing. Later, when Carla left, Gloria gathered the trust files to return them to their drawer. As she slid the top binder into place, a smaller folder tipped forward, spilling its contents. A single page caught her eye, an old authorization form from last year. Her pulse quickened. Michael's name was signed in bold ink alongside hers. But the slant of the letters, the odd curl on the M, something was wrong. She had seen that curl before in a thank you card from Vanessa, in the signature on the boutique's delivery slip. She pulled out another document, same signature, same hand, 2 forms, both granting joint access to an account she had never approved. A cold clarity spread through her chest. Vanessa hadn't just kept her out of decisions, she'd stepped into her place, without permission, and signed her son's name to do it. Gloria set the papers side by side on the table, studying them under the lamplight. The ink on one was slightly faded, the other fresh enough to gleam. Together, they told a story sharper than anything she could put into words for Michael. She reached for the phone, her fingers steady. The screen lit her face as she scrolled to a number she'd saved months ago and never thought she'd use. She pressed call, and when the voice on the other end answered, she said, "I need a probate investigator. Their documents said family trust, but someone tampered behind the scenes." The probate investigator arrived on a Thursday morning, his knock a polite rhythm against the front door. Gloria opened it to a tall man in a charcoal coat, his briefcase balanced easily in one hand. "Mrs. Carver?" he asked. She nodded and stepped aside. "Come in." "Everything's in the dining room." The table was already covered in neat stacks, trust binders, account statements, and the 2 forged authorization forms she'd found. He took a seat, sliding on reading glasses that caught the light. For nearly an hour he examined each page, marking notes in tight handwriting. Occasionally he glanced up, asking a pointed question about dates or signatures. When he reached the questionable forms, he laid them side by side. "You're correct," he said, tapping the curl in the M with the end of his pen. "These were signed by the same hand. It's not your son's." Gloria folded her hands in her lap. "That hand belongs to my daughter-in-law." He kept his tone neutral. "Then we're looking at forged, and by extension, unauthorized access to the trust." Her jaw tightened, but she stayed quiet as he moved on to the spending ledgers. The columns of charges rolled out like an accusation: airfare, boutique expenses, high-end home goods. Then he paused over a set of resort charges: 4 nights at a beachfront hotel in Florida, mid-season rates. "Was this trip part of any approved trust business?" he asked. "No," she said. "They didn't even invite me." Later, when the findings were presented to Michael and Vanessa, in a short meeting at her attorney's office, Vanessa sat with her chin lifted. "This is absurd," she said. "That trip was a wellness retreat. Stress relief." The investigator slid the printout toward her. "Paid directly from the trust account. No notation, no authorization, and the signature granting joint access is forged." Michael's eyes flicked from the paper to Vanessa. For a second a crack showed in his composure. I trusted your judgment," he said, voice low. Vanessa didn't look at him. Gloria watched them both, a stillness settling over her. The anger she'd felt earlier was gone, replaced by something heavier and quieter, a sadness shaped by recognition. She had spent years believing trust was the soil relationships grew. Now she knew it could just as easily hide rot. Back home, she called Carla. The sound of her friend's voice was grounding. "From now on," Carla said, "you secure every document, lock them up. Digital and hard copy. No one gets near them without you present." "I will," Gloria replied. That night she sat at her desk, a fresh legal pad in front of her. She wrote the date at the top, and then in a slow hand, "No more for them, only for the grandchildren." The letters looked final, the ink soaking deep into the paper. It wasn't a vow made in bitterness, it was clarity. She could still give, still nurture, but she would do it without being pulled under by anyone else's ambitions. The winter wind pressed against the house as she filed away the investigator's report, each folder sliding into place with a muted thud. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice, then stopped. The quiet felt earned. The next afternoon, the mail arrived in its usual scatter catalogs, bills and a single white envelope with Vanessa's return address in the corner. Gloria turned it over in her hands before opening it. Inside was a check for $5,000. The memo line written in Vanessa's tidy script. Restoration. Gloria stood at the counter, the paper cool against her fingers, wondering whether it was meant as apology, bribe, or proof that Vanessa still believed she could buy her way back into trust. She set the check down, the ink glinting in the kitchen light, knowing it was only the beginning of the next move. She repaid me the money, then tagged it as family goodwill. The check lay in the center of Gloria's kitchen counter like a misplaced playing card, the pale green paper too bright against the worn oak. She'd left it there overnight, as if distance might change its meaning. In the morning light, the memo line stood out more than the number restoration. Her fingers traced the letters, the loops too tidy to be anything but deliberate. She had been cold when she opened it yesterday, but now holding it again she felt something else. A thrum of weariness, the way one reacts to a rattlesnake keeping still in the grass. Her phone chimed. A text from Vanessa. Thought we could start fresh. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just the same glossed-over control Vanessa always favored, the kind that wrapped an insult in ribbon. Minutes later, another message. This one from Michael. Thanks, Mom. This means a lot. She could picture his face, relieved, maybe even grateful. But his words left her caught between pity and disbelief. He thought this small offering had reset the board. She put the check in a slim manila envelope and slipped it into her purse before leaving for the bank. Inside, the air smelled faintly of printer toner and lemon cleaner. Gloria approached the counter, laying the check down, but keeping a hand on it. I'd like to place this on hold, she told the teller. Not deposit, just keep it in my account's safe file. The young woman nodded, sliding it into a plastic sleeve. We can store it until you decide. On the walk back to her car, Gloria replayed the numbers in her mind. $5,000, a fraction of the overages the investigator had uncovered. Less than the single order of imported tile. The restoration label was almost laughable. At home, she spread the renovation budget sheets across her desk, scanning columns of costs until her eyes blurred. Even the most conservative tally made the check look like pocket change. She called Carla. It's not appreciation, Gloria said when her friend answered. It's tokenism. She's not restoring anything. She's reducing it to a tip. Carla let out a dry chuckle. Tips are for waiters, not women who built the foundation. They talked for another 10 minutes, circling the same conclusion. Accepting it would mean agreeing to the story Vanessa wanted told, that Gloria had been wrong overreacting and could now be soothed with a sum small enough to avoid notice on a credit card bill. By late afternoon, the decision settled over her. Not hot, not hasty. Cool as the January air outside her window, she retrieved the check from the bank's file that same day, the plastic sleeve whispering as she slid it free. At her desk, she wrote on her personal stationery. The paper was thick, the ink dark. No, she didn't sign her name, she didn't explain. She folded the note around the check, sealed it in a plain envelope and addressed it in her cleanest script. The next morning, she walked to the post office. The floor tiles were cold under her shoes, and the line moved slowly, but she didn't mind. When her turn came, she slid the envelope across the counter and watched the clerk press the postmark down in a single satisfying stamp. By the time she returned home, the winter sun had already started its descent, streaking the sky in pale gold. The house felt still, expectant. Her laptop was open on the kitchen table from earlier, the email window minimized. She moved the mouse, and the screen lit up. At the top of her inbox was a new message from Vanessa. The subject line was blank. She clicked. The message was short, centered on the screen like a challenge. If you don't take it, I will sue. Gloria sat back in her chair, the words glowing against the pale background. Knowing this was no longer about a check, it was about the fight Vanessa had just made official. She threatened me with legal action. I threatened her with truth. Gloria read Vanessa's email twice before forwarding it to Carla. She added no commentary, just the subject line filing this under nonsense. Carla's reply came back in under a minute. Don't answer. Let's bring in someone who eats this for breakfast. Within the hour, Gloria had sent the email chain to an elder rights advocate she'd met at a library talk last spring. Her subject line was as measured as her breathing: potential harassment, legal intimidation, advice requested. The advocate, a lean woman named Harriet, with an unflinching voice, called that evening. If she's threatening to sue, we make sure she knows you're not alone, Harriet said. Forward me every document you have, including the forged signatures and the investigator's report. We'll build a response that's fact, not fear. Gloria gathered the files into a secure digital folder, naming it Integrity. The screen glowed with the growing list: scanned trust ledgers, notarized statements, photographs of Vanessa's handwriting. By the next morning, Vanessa had escalated. Calls came from 2 different legal offices, one polite, one curt, each leaving voicemails about amicable resolution and avoiding unnecessary litigation. Gloria saved them all without responding. When Carla came by that afternoon, she dropped her bag on the counter and said, "Time to move the line in the sand to concrete." Together, they sat at Gloria's dining table, while Carla drafted a motion to file a restraining clause on any further trust distributions until the dispute was resolved. The language was plain and immovable. "Once this is filed," Carla said, tapping the printed page, "nothing moves without your signature. Not a dime." The following day, Gloria walked the papers to the courthouse herself. The marble floors echoed under her steps, her reflection sharp in the polished wall. When she handed the motion to the clerk, it felt like sealing a door she would never reopen. That night, Michael called. His voice was thin with frustration. "This is tearing the family apart, Mom." Gloria closed her eyes for a moment, picturing him as a boy with skinned knees and easy laughter, then forced the image away. "No, Michael," she said, her tone steady as a ruler laid flat on a desk. "You turned my kindness into chaos." There was a long pause, the kind where you can almost hear the other person deciding whether to hang up or lash out. He chose neither, just muttered something she couldn't catch, and ended the call. Later, Gloria sat alone in her study, the desk lamp casting a warm pool over the surface. She pulled out a yellow legal pad, and wrote at the top Foundation Concept, Legacy Fund. The idea had been circling in her mind all week. Move her remaining assets into something untouchable, something that would outlive any family quarrel. Scholarships, community garden, legal aid for women starting late in life. Her pen slowed, hovering above the paper as she imagined it. The clean break, the permanence, the part of her that still loved Michael ached at the thought. But the part of her that knew survival understood it might be the only way forward. She pushed the pad aside when her laptop pinged with a new email. The sender was unfamiliar, but the subject line was unmistakable. Press inquiry, confirmation requested. Curiosity prickled. She opened. The body contained a single paragraph. "We're running a story tomorrow about your recent decision to dissolve the family trust." The working headline reads, "Local matriarch ends trust with son over family image battle. Please confirm details before print." Gloria leaned back in her chair, the cursor blinking at the end of the sentence. Her reflection stared back from the darkened window, composed, almost regal. She reached for her phone, knowing that by sunrise her private war was about to become a public reckoning. The town read about our story. Everyone had an opinion. By sunrise the headline was already live. "Local matriarch ends trust with son over family image battle." Her name wasn't in the first sentence, but anyone within 50 miles knew who it was. Gloria scrolled slowly, the coffee in her mug, cooling untouched. The article was balanced enough, quotes from sources close to the family on both sides, a brief mention of financial disagreements, but the comments section had already turned into a public jury. By mid-morning, the local neighborhood group on social media was buzzing. She didn't have an account, but Carla did, and she read aloud snippets over the phone. "Good for her, too many older women are treated like open wallets." Carla paused. "And here, someone says she's just bitter because she lost control." The words landed without much sting. Gloria had expected nothing less than a split verdict. By noon, her phone rang again, this time an unfamiliar number. She almost let it go to voicemail, but something in the area code stopped. "Mrs. Carver? This is Judith Fenton from the Riverbend Literacy Foundation." The woman's voice was warm, quick. "I read about your situation. I run a reading mentorship program for at-risk youth, and I think you'd be a perfect fit. You'd have total discretion, no politics, just books and kids." The offer was so unexpectedly kind that Gloria found herself smiling. "Send me the details," she said, scribbling down an email address. That small lift didn't last long. Later that afternoon, Carla texted her a screenshot Vanessa had posted to her own feed, no names, but the insinuation was clear. "Some people confuse control with care. I protect my home." The comments under Vanessa's post were a chorus of sympathy from her friends, punctuated by the occasional backhanded, "It's such a shame when family can't get along." Carla called within minutes. "She's baiting you," she warned. "If you answer, you lose control of the frame." and the media will spin it until you don't recognize yourself in the story. I have no intention of replying, Gloria said. Her voice was calm, but her hands curled into the edge of the counter. So she stayed silent. No public posts, no statements, just the small, steady rhythm of her own life. Watering the peace lily in the front hall, folding laundry, answering only the calls she wanted. The quiet didn't last. That evening, Michael's number appeared. She debated letting it ring out, but pressed accept on the last buzz. His voice was hesitant, threaded with something close to fear. Are we even safe as a family anymore? Gloria leaned back against the wall, the phone warm against her ear. Safe from what, Michael? He hesitated. From this. From the way people are looking at us now. She didn't answer right away. The truth was, safety had been gone long before the headlines, back when Vanessa learned she could sign his name without asking, and he'd never notice. You're asking the wrong question, she said finally, and ended the call before he could fill the silence with another plea. Night fell in slow layers. Outside, the street lamp cast a pale ring over the frosted lawn. Gloria was in the middle of washing dishes when she heard the soft metallic clatter of the mail slot. She dried her hands and crossed to the hallway. A thin stack of envelopes lay on the rug. She flipped past a flyer for discount mattresses, a water bill, and then stopped. It was a thick cream envelope, her name typed in a formal serif font, no return address. Across the front, in bold black letters, was a phrase she had never seen on mail before. Trust tracker. She stood there, thumb tracing the edge of the flap, sensing it might not just hold numbers, it might hold the next move in a game she hadn't finished playing. He asked the court to remove me as executor, but I had already replaced myself. The envelope's contents were exactly what she'd guessed, only colder in black and white. Petition for removal of trustee, filed by Michael Carver, represented by an unfamiliar law firm in the city. The pages spoke in legalese, but the subtext was blunt. She was unfit to manage the trust. Gloria set the papers beside her tea and called her attorney. Will respond in kind, he said. And in truth, a week later she stepped into the courthouse, her heels echoing against the marble floor. The air carried a faint smell of paper and old polish. In her hand was a slim folder, proof of the revocation she'd already filed weeks earlier. She no longer acted as trustee for Michael or Vanessa. The assets were frozen until her discretion allowed otherwise. Michael sat at the petitioner's table, suit jacket slightly wrinkled. Vanessa was beside him, her hair glossy, her expression a mask of injured grace. Across the aisle, Gloria took her seat beside her lawyer. Carla sat directly behind, her presence like a spine pressed into Gloria's back. When the judge asked for evidence, her lawyer stood first. Your Honor, my client had already withdrawn her co-trustee designation before this petition was filed. The removal request is moot. He handed over the signed and notarized revocation. The judge examined it, then looked toward Carla, who stepped forward with a neat stack. Documentation of forgery, she said evenly, including handwriting analysis and the investigator's report on unauthorized disbursement. The rustle of papers was the only sound as the bailiff carried them up. Vanessa's lawyer rose next, declaring that she was prepared to submit sworn declarations of emotional distress caused by Gloria's actions. The phrase hung in the air like perfume in an elevator, cloying and hard to escape. When the judge gestured toward her, Gloria stood. The wood of the witness stand felt smooth under her hands. She met the judge's eyes and spoke in a voice that was steady, almost quiet. I raised a man, Your Honor, she said, not his entitlement. The courtroom didn't stir, but she saw Michael shift in his chair, jaw tightening. She continued, the trust was built for family, yes, but not at the cost of erasing the one who built it. If that is now considered unfit, then so be it. But the record should reflect why I acted, and what I refused to fund. The judge's pen scratched across the page, capturing her words in shorthand. He didn't look up until she'd returned to her seat. The rest of the afternoon unfolded in measured steps. Documents accepted, statements read into record, questions asked without much drama. By the time the judge cleared his throat to give his decision, the winter light had gone thin and gray through the tall windows. Miss Carver will retain her status in relation to the trust, he said. However, given the contested history and allegations of mismanagement, the court requires an independent accounting to be conducted and audited within 30 days. Michael's lawyer began to object, but the judge held up a hand. This is not punishment. It is clarity, and clarity benefits everyone. The gavel struck once, decisive. Gloria gathered her papers without looking toward Michael or Vanessa, but she could feel his gaze, a strange mixture of resentment and something smaller, almost like unease. Outside, the air was brittle with cold. Carla slipped an arm through hers as they descended the steps. 30 days, she said. That's just enough time for the truth to breathe. When Gloria got home, the mail was waiting on the hall table. A large brown envelope sat on top, its corner stamped in red, Court-appointed audit services. She slid it open with her thumb. The letter inside was brief, the date printed in bold near the top. Audit begins Monday morning. She set it down, her mind already moving through drawers and files, knowing that by next week, every number of her life would be under a stranger's lens. They looked through everything from travel charges to grocery receipts. The audit team arrived on Monday with the precision of a moving crew. 2 men in dark suits and a woman in a tailored navy blazer stepped onto Gloria's porch at exactly 9 a.m., their leather cases thudding softly as she opened the door. Mrs. Carver, the lead auditor, his voice carried no judgment, only formality. Come in, she said, holding the door wide. The dining room's ready. Every inch of the long oak table was neatly organized, binders labeled by year, manila folders stacked by account, a small tray of pens and highlighters at the center. The winter light poured through the tall window, turning the paper edges almost translucent. The auditors took their seats, unpacking laptops and scanners. The woman, Miss Dorsey, according to her nameplate, slid on reading glasses. We'll begin with disbursements from the trust. Chronological order, please. Gloria passed over the first binder. Pages turned in steady rhythm, interrupted only by the occasional click of a pen or the soft hiss of a scanner bed closing. When they reached last spring's records, one of the men, Fletcher, paused. Venetian hotel charges, 2 separate entries, 3 nights each. Gloria leaned forward, pulling a slim folder from the stack. Those were business accommodations for an estate planning conference I attended in Las Vegas. Here are the receipts, registration forms, and the panel schedule with my name list. Fletcher compared the documents, nodding once before moving on, but minutes later, Ms. Dorsey's pencil tapped against another page. Additional Venetian charges. Same month, different account holder. She angled the ledger toward Gloria. Vanessa Carver. Gloria recognized the date immediately. Those are unrelated to trust business. I have no receipts for them because they weren't mine. Her tone was calm, but inside she noted the way the auditor's pens began moving faster. The hours unspooled in quiet industry. Every transfer, every grocery purchase, every flight examined, cross-referenced, annotated. Gloria never once had to stall or guess. Each answer was paired with a paper trail. At noon she brought in a tray of sandwiches and coffee. Fletcher declined, but Ms. Dorsey took a cup, murmuring thanks. You keep immaculate records, Mrs. Carver, she said, almost as if surprised. Gloria allowed herself a small smile. I document life, she replied, not drama. By late afternoon, the dining room had shifted from paper fortress to orderly stacks, each binder tagged with colored tabs marking completed sections. One seat at the table, however, remained empty. Vanessa had been notified, invited, and even formally requested to attend. She had not responded. The absence spoke louder than any outburst could have. Just before the team began packing up, Ms. Dorsey closed her laptop. We have what we need for a preliminary report. It will go to the court before the week's end. Gloria walked them to the door, the winter air sharp on her face as they stepped onto the porch. She stood there for a moment after they left, watching the taillights fade down the block. Inside, the dining room smelled faintly of paper and brewed coffee. She gathered the remaining binders and returned them to the cabinet, each one sliding into its place with a quiet finality. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Carla checking in. Gloria texted back a simple "all done, calm seas." The rest of the evening passed in domestic quiet. She fed the cat, folded laundry and poured a glass of wine without once looking at the clock. It was only after she'd settled into the armchair, book in hand, that the ping of a new email broke the stillness. The sender's name was Court-Appointed Audit Services. She opened preliminary findings, no misuse of trust funds by Mrs. Carver, full report to follow. Gloria stared at the line, the glow of the screen soft against her face, knowing the truth was now written in a record no one could rewrite. They expected me to lose assets. Instead, they lost access. The courthouse was cold in that way that ignored the seasoned stone floors and high ceilings swallowing heat. Gloria sat at the respondent's table, her gloved hands folded neatly over the edge of a legal pad. Beside her, her attorney murmured a few final notes as the judge shuffled paper. The audit report lay in front of him, its clipped pages fat with exhibits. He adjusted his glasses. After reviewing the independent accounting, he began, "The court finds no misuse of trust funds by Mrs. Carver." The sentence dropped into the room like a stone into still water, quiet ripples, but undeniable. Gloria let her breath leave slowly, controlled. The judge turned the page. "We do find instances of forgery connected to Miss Carver's daughter-in-law Vanessa Carver, specifically 2 authorization forms and several expense reports padded beyond reasonable market value." A low cough from the petitioner's side broke the silence. Michael's knee jiggled under the table. Vanessa's chin lifted, eyes fixed straight ahead. As a result, the judge continued, "Mrs. Vanessa Carver is ordered to personally remediate the amounts drawn from the trust without authorization. This repayment will not pass through her spouse's account." Gloria's attorney passed her a discreet nod. Additionally, the judge said, "Given the protracted nature of this dispute and the unfounded petition for removal, Mrs. Carver is awarded reimbursement of her legal costs, to be paid from the trust's administrative budget." Michael's head jerked slightly, his lips parting as though to speak, but no sound came. He stared at the tabletop, a faint flush creeping up his neck. The judge wasn't finished. "Going forward, all distributions intended for the Carver grandchildren will be sent directly to their designated custodial accounts, without parental veto or diversion. The intent of the trust shall be preserved." Gloria felt the smallest tightening in her throat, not grief exactly, but the weight of something long fought for finally settling. She sat straighter, fixing her gaze on the bench. From the corner of her eye she saw Vanessa's lawyer lean in, whisper. Whatever was said made her daughter-in-law's mouth flatten. A few minutes later, as the clerk recorded the orders, Vanessa quietly withdrew 2 of her remaining complaints, the pages sliding back into the folder with a soft hit. The judge signed off on the orders, and just like that it was done. Outside, the winter light was pale and thin, but it felt like oxygen after weeks in a sealed room. Carla met her at the top of the courthouse steps, eyes bright. "You stood your ground," she said, and the ground held. Gloria managed a small laugh, though her eyes burned. "I just told the truth. It did the rest." On the drive home she passed the familiar curve of road where the trees leaned in like old friends. The relief was real, but it came braided with a quieter sorrow for the boy Michael had been, for the woman she'd never really been able to meet in Vanessa, for the pieces of family life now scattered. Back in her kitchen, she hung up her coat and placed her gloves in the drawer. The house was still, the kind of still that let the sound of the clock in the hall feel louder than it was. She poured a glass of water, stood at the counter, and let the day sink into her bones. Her phone buzzed on the table. Unknown number. No, not unknown. The digits were etched in her memory. One new text. No greeting, no punctuation, just 4 words, "You'll regret this." Gloria set the phone down without replying, her palm flat against the cool wood, aware that sometimes a threat is less about the danger ahead and more about the fear of the person who sends it. "She warned me. I renamed the entire trust for my grandkids alone. The text from Vanessa still sat unanswered in her phone when Gloria drove downtown the next morning. The sky was a flat sheet of winter white, the kind that made street lamps look like they'd been left on by mistake. In her passenger seat, a navy binder rested against a sealed manila envelope. Inside were the final amendments she'd drafted with her attorney, pages that would cut Michael's name from the trust entirely and rewrite its purpose for only two people, Sophie and Jack. The law office smelled faintly of ink and dry wool. Carla was already there, coat draped over the back of a chair, glasses perched low as she skimmed the top sheet. "It's clean," Carla said, passing it back. "No one can touch it. Not him, not her. Insolvency proof, locked tight until the kids are of age." Gloria signed each page in black ink, pressing the pen firmly enough that the impressions ghosted through to the copy underneath. When the last signature was done, she slid the binder across the desk to Carla. "You're not executor anymore," Carla reminded her gently. "You're guardian now. Different title, same intent." Gloria smiled faintly. "I can live with that." The documents were notarized, stamped, sealed. By the time she left, the sky had started to snow, flakes swirling like paper scraps in the wind. She walked to her car without hurrying, feeling the peculiar lightness of having set something down for good. By late afternoon, her phone lit with Michael's name. She considered letting it ring, but pressed accept. "That was harsh," he said without preamble. Gloria's gaze drifted to the frost curling along the edges of the kitchen window. "They smell a mother's love," she said evenly. "And flinch. That's their choice, not mine." Michael sighed into the line, the sound long and low, like he was trying to empty it of words. "I don't know what to say." "Then don't," she replied, and ended the call. An hour later, her laptop pinged with a FaceTime request. Sophie's face filled the screen first, then Jack's, both cheeks flushed with excitement. "Grandma, Mom said you made something for us," Sophie blurted. Gloria leaned closer to the screen. "Not for you, with you in mind." Jack waved a crayon drawing at the camera, the paper wobbling. "We're gonna keep it forever." Her throat tightened unexpectedly. "I hope you keep the idea of it forever," she said, smiling through the prickle behind her eye. They talked for another 10 minutes. School projects, Jack's lost tooth, Sophie's new piano piece, until their mother's voice called them away. Gloria closed the laptop with a care that felt almost ceremonial. The house was quiet again. She made tea, then carried it into her study and sat at her desk. The leather-bound journal lay open to a fresh page. In her careful looping script, she wrote, "I withdrew from their image, for them, not from them." She set the pen down, letting the words breathe on the paper. The snow outside had thickened, muffling the sounds of the street. She could hear only the faint hum of the furnace and the slow tick of the clock in the hall. A knock at the door startled her, not the sharp rap of a visitor, but the hollow tap of the mail slot opening. She crossed to the front hall and bent to collect the delivery. Among the usual bills and flyers was a cream envelope heavier than the rest. Her name was written in formal, looping calligraphy, the kind used for weddings or official ceremony. The return address was embossed in gold: Riverbend Council on Aging. She slid a finger under the flap. Inside, on thick cardstock, the words were centered in elegant serif type. "The Committee on Elder Excellence is honored to invite you to our annual awards evening." Gloria stared at the card, the snow still falling behind her through the glass. Realizing that somewhere between the first withdrawal and this moment, she had stepped fully into the life she'd chosen, not the one someone else had tried to design for her. Community calls me hero, family calls me threat. The Riverbend Cultural Hall glowed against the winter night, its arched windows spilling gold light onto the icy sidewalk. Gloria stepped inside, the warmth wrapping around her like a borrowed shawl. The scent of polished wood and evergreen garlands filled the air. She'd chosen her navy wool dress, uncomplicated, dignified, and a brooch shaped like an open book. Carla met her in the foyer, a quick squeeze of the hand their only greeting. "Big night," Carla murmured. They moved toward the main hall, where round tables were set with linen and flickering candles. Gloria was halfway to her assigned seat when a ripple passed through the crowd. Near the entrance, Vanessa appeared, silver earrings catching the light, Michael a pace behind her. Vanessa's eyes found Gloria's instantly, the look sharp enough to slice the air between them. Gloria didn't flinch. She turned, chin level, and walked toward the stage instead. She wasn't here for them. The ceremony moved quickly. Awards for volunteers, for lifelong educators, for quiet community builders. When the master of ceremonies called her name, applause rose like a tide. Gloria stepped onto the stage, the weight of a dozen gazes pressing warm against her. She rested her hands on the podium, waiting for the room to still. "My service," she began, voice even, "does not end when they erase me. It ends when my love flows onward, untouched by politics, family quarrels, or the illusion that worth is measured in control." A murmur swept the hall, but she continued, "I dedicate tonight's honor, and the trust I have built, to children who lack safety and entitlement. May they find it in community instead." For a moment, the silence felt suspended, like snow hanging mid-fall. Then came the applause, stronger, louder, layered with the sound of people rising to their feet. Gloria stepped down from the stage and returned to her seat. Carla's eyes were bright. "You didn't just accept an award," she whispered. "You threw a lifeline." By the next morning, the local paper carried the headline, "Grandmother Fights for Legacy at Elder Excellence Awards." The photo beneath showed Gloria at the podium, one hand lifted, her brooch catching the stage lights. That afternoon, she stopped by the market for bread and tea. As she stepped out into the cold, a woman in a plum-colored scarf intercepted her. She looked younger than Gloria, but her eyes carried the kind of tired that didn't come from lack of sleep. "You don't know me," the woman said, "but I wanted to give you the—" She pressed a small envelope into Gloria's hand. "From a mother you helped." Before Gloria could respond, the woman was already walking away, scarf trailing in the wind. At home, she set the groceries on the counter and opened the envelope. Inside was a folded sheet of cream stationery. The handwriting slanted slightly, each line deliberate. "Because you fought for what was right, my daughter has a safe place to live. You showed me that dignity doesn't require permission. I hope you know what you've done matters." The words settled into her chest with a weight both grounding and warm. She placed the letter in the navy binder, tucking it under the tab marked Legacy. Evening came early, the snow outside swirling under the street lamp. Gloria brewed tea, the scent of chamomile rising like steam from another life. She carried the mug into the study and set it beside her journal. The laptop on her desk chimed. A new message. She moved the mouse, and the screen lit up with a single unread email. No subject line. No sender name she recognized. Only a signature at the bottom of the preview. She clicked it open. The first line glowed against the screen. The words so unexpected that she felt her pulse shift, as if the night itself had leaned closer to listen. He said he wasn't choosing side, but he already had. The message sat open on the screen, its first line pulling her forward in her chair. "I think it's time you heard my side." It was signed simply. Gloria's mind sifted through possibilities. The signature was too stark for Michael, too formal for Martin. From the Literacy Foundation. The email address was unfamiliar, a string of letters and numbers that gave nothing away. She scrolled. "You've been told things about me, about what I knew and what I allowed. I want you to hear the truth before the court forces it out of me." Her eyes paused there, the weight of the words pressing into her ribs. "Forces it out of me," she read on. "Vanessa wasn't the only one signing papers. I saw some of it. I told myself it was harmless. I didn't think you'd notice. When you started asking questions, I panicked. I let her tell me what to say, and I said it." Gloria's hands stayed still on the desk, though she could feel the pulse in her wrists. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, but I am asking for a meeting. Just us. No lawyers, no Carla. If you're willing, reply by Friday. If not, I'll go through with my deposition and let them drag us all through the mud." The cursor blinked in the reply box, a small metronome, marking her hesitation. She thought of Michael's voice on the phone weeks ago, calling her, of his silence in court when the judge ruled, of the way he'd sat beside Vanessa and not beside truth. Her tea had gone cold. She closed the laptop without answering, stood and walked to the window. The street outside was dark except for a single lamplight, the snow in its glow moving in tight spirals. Her phone buzzed on the desk. A text from Carla. "How's the quiet tonight?" Gloria stared at the screen, then typed "not quiet, ma'am just wrote." The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared. Carla called instead. What did he say? Gloria's voice was steady. He says he wants to meet. No one else there. Claims he'll talk under oath if I refuse. Carla was silent for a beat. Then if you go, you don't go unprotected, and you don't go without proof of what he says. Gloria turned from the window, her reflection in the glass almost blending with the night outside. I'm not sure I go at all. After they hung up, she returned to the desk and reopened the laptop. The email still sat there, the words waiting for an answer. She didn't type one. Instead, she printed the message, slid it into a clear plastic sleeve, and placed it in the front of the integrity folder, the one that had begun with the first forged signature. As she closed the binder, the furnace kicked on, filling the house with its low, constant hum. It was nearly midnight when she went to bed, the snow still falling beyond the dark panes. The message from Mem stayed in her mind, its edges sharp enough to keep her awake. In the quiet before sleep, she realized the choice wasn't whether to meet him, it was whether to let the truth arrive on her terms or the court.